Hello, my name is Barry. I'm a member of the Inverclyde Shed. I've been a member for a couple of years now. Seems a long time ago, well before lockdown. When I first came to the shed, I brought along my hobby, which is wood carving. Nobody else much was doing anything in the way of wood carving. They were all playing with big machines and doing big things. So I sat quietly in the corner making things at a smaller scale. And, you know, over the time, people became interested in what I was doing and started to take more notice and seeing the things that I was making. And as a result, people started to ask if they could learn a little bit more about it. And so that's what we did. We set up a carving club, and that was able to last through the pandemic shutdown, largely through Zoom. And we've had a couple of sessions, a couple of classes through Zoom, and I think they've been very successful. People seem to have enjoyed them anyway, with a lot of interesting output. So today what I want to do is take you through the process of making a spoon. Why a spoon? We try and take everybody who joins the carving club through the process of making a spoon. It doesn't really matter what the outcome's like, whether it's a spoon or not. It's the process that matters. It's something you've made, something you've enjoyed making, hopefully. And it is a way of learning techniques with the tools and learning about your own manual dexterity, your physical ability to work the tools, your strength in your wrists and your fingers, and also to learn about the wood, the way the grain goes, which is the best way to cut it, how to shape it, what to do with it. And so we do encourage people to learn, first of all, how to make spoons, and we take it from there. And the guys then go on and do all sorts of things like porridge spurtles, honey dippers, walking sticks, wood spirits, pens, quite an array of things, and the imagination starts to get fired up, and people make things perhaps unexpectedly that you know they find out how to use the knives and they start to think about what they can make. In fact, recently we had a porridge spurtle with an alien's head, which I thought was absolutely brilliant, and it's just a really good example of what we can and can't do. So what we're going to do now is give you 4 sessions. We're going to talk about the wood and the tools, first of all, for about 10 minutes. And then we'll have another section looking at preparation and the objective of what we're going to try and set out. Then we'll look at the techniques that you can use, the way you can use the tools, and what else you can do with other tools once you've moved beyond the basic kit. And then we'll look at finishing, how best to present what you've made and be proud of it, I guess. But we're going to kick off with looking at the tools and the wood and learning a little bit about how we get started. So please sit back and hopefully enjoy what's coming. And right, carving a spoon. Or perhaps I should say carving a spoon my way, because there are as many ways to carve a spoon as there are carvers out there. Everybody has a different idea, but this works for me, and hopefully it will give a few tips for you as well. The Carving Club is open to anybody who's a member of Inverclyde Shed. It's just a question of expressing an interest in turning up. We meet every Monday on Zoom, and I'm rather hoping that in the days to come we'll be able to do that face to face. But it's worked so far reasonably well, and we have some interesting people who are doing some good things. Now, when you join the Carving Club, you will be furnished with one of these, a little tool roll, free of charge, and it's yours to keep, unless of course you decide you want to hand it back if you're no longer interested. This contains several things. The most important thing it contains is a set of gloves, and these are cut resist gloves, and they're really important. So many people don't wear them or forget to wear them. I mean, you can see how many cuts there are in that left hand there. It's difficult to actually say how many times I've cut myself, but that's been my own fault because I haven't worn the gloves. So we'll put them to one side at the moment, but as soon as we pick up a knife, we'll pick up the gloves. Within the kit we also have 3 knives and what is actually a stropping a stropping leather. And the knives contained are, this one is called a hook knife. It's used primarily, well, exclusively really, for digging out the bowl of the spoon, which is why it's that shape. It's sharp on one side, not on the other, so it's a right-handed hook knife, and I'll show you how we use that. I really should say as well that with carving we always have two hands involved, with the knife or with the knife and the item. Whittling is more of a situation where you're using one hand with the knife, but for carving we need a great deal of control and direction, so we need basically to use the strength of both hands. More about that later. So we also have two knives in here. It's fairly arbitrary what you want to call these. There seems to be sort of general agreement amongst all the suppliers of these little kits, which incidentally are widely available. Amazon has various offerings. They're all about £20. This was an Amazon recommended one quite a while ago. I think it's still available. They tend to refer to these, this being a detail knife and this being a whittling knife. I don't know where these names come from, but I don't use them. I don't like giving the knives particular names because it implies that that's all they can do. The knife is the appropriate knife for the job, is what the knife's called. For example, I use this little knife here a great deal. It happens to fit my hand really nicely. It's got a small blade, which is very easy to keep sharp, and it just suits me. I've used it for a very long time, and will continue to do so. But this is what the kit comes with, and these are perfectly adequate for making a spoon. It also comes with this stropping kit here. Now, this consists of a piece of leather, smooth on one side and leathery on the other, and a compound, a sharpening compound. Now, in saying that, this is not for sharpening knives, this is for honing knives. Your knives should be sharp all the time. If your knife needs sharpening, it's either because it's not been honed for a long time, or it's been misused or damaged in some way, and that's where you would resort to using a whetstone or something similar like a diamond stone, or even, heaven forbid, some sort of grinder. But as long as the edge of the knife is in reasonable condition, then you should be able to keep it nice and sharp using just the strop. How this is used is we would attach this to a piece of wood like this, and just by gluing it on simply with the shiny side down. And then we would apply the compound, lots and lots of it. As you can see, there's lots of compound in here. It's just a question of rubbing it in. Some people heat them with candles to make them softer. You can leave them in a saucer sitting on top of the central heating radiator or whatever to make them softer, but the bottom line is that you want to get plenty of this onto the strop, because what you're going to do with this is just keep the knives shiny and sharp. So you would tend to use the strop before you start carving and when you finish, just to give it a little brightness. And the way you would use that is as follows. Again, there are many different ways of using these, but for stropping purposes, we would place the knife on about 22.5-degree angle and then bring it down. Maybe about 10 times that way, and maybe about 10 times that way. And then 9 and 9, 8, 8, and so on. Checking all the time that it's nice and sharp. You can, of course, attempt to cut pieces of paper with it and so on, but you'll soon find out when it's sharp when you start to use it. So that's what that's for. Put this in here. We won't need that just now, but we will need these items. So we'll put this away. Right, so with these traditional shaped knives, we are going to attempt to make a spoon. One of these. This is made out of basswood, also known as lime. Basswood is the American name. It's the same species, it just has a different name. And it's a lovely wood to work with. It's soft, it has a nice grain, it doesn't splinter, It's easy to cut and easy to acquire. So there is a block of basswood lime, again readily available on the internet. I've marked this one out already and cut it in an attempt to get more than one spoon shape out of it, and decided that this would be the shape of the spoon I'm looking for. You can of course modify that and change the shape as you wish, but that's what we're going to start with. A little bit thick, this one, so I've cut one down Blue Peter style so that we can start with a reasonable piece of wood. So that's the design we're going to go for, and the first thing we want to do is make some stop cuts. Now stop cuts are precisely that. They are cuts which are designed to stop the knife from going too far. We'll run the knife down the design that we've got, pushing gently into the wood. Not too far. We don't want to make too deep a cut because it's quite difficult to get rid of afterwards when you're finishing the knife. But run it round until such time as you've got a stop line all the way around. Once having done that, you've made your basic shape. It's then relatively easy to start to cut into that, just along the edges. As you can see, it's quite clean there against the stop line. So essentially we're going to end up with this spoon shape cut out of this piece of wood. Now, where are we going to start once we've done that? The weakest part of this spoon, while we're working with it, is the narrowest part, which is here. The part that we're going to apply the most pressure on with the hook knife is here, to excavate the shape of the ball. So basically, rather than trimming this down any more than it has to be, we're going to start up here without taking too much wood off here, otherwise it's possible for this to snap. So let's look at using the hook knife. The idea here is that we're going to excavate into this area and cut out the shape of a spoon. Now a good way to help us do that is to put some extra stop lines in there. It gives us something to aim for, it gives the knife something to cut against, which helps it to actually dig out more material. That's the sharp side, so I'm going to place it on a piece of wood, and then using my left hand I'm pushing, and using my right hand I'm twisting and turning, and as you can see, the material is starting to come out. Again on the other side, and then down the middle, you can take some material out that way as well. So as you can see, it's an ideal knife for the job. However, it is time consuming and fairly boring to watch. So I'll pause the video here and come back when I've got something a little bit deeper and more like a spoon to show you. Right, while he's over there being all artistic, making his spoon, I'll show you some of the techniques he might be using in order to cut out the spoon and to smooth it down a bit, take some more material off. We've already covered the subject of knives, but a really sharp knife is so important, I can't stress that. It's good for every aspect of making spoons or making anything. It's capable of taking a great deal of material off and also doing very fine work. As you can see, a very sharp knife. And also we can use it in a number of different ways. So whatever your weapon of choice is, make sure it's really sharp. What I've got here is a number of different options as well. Clearly we're using this hook knife at the moment to take out the bulk of material from the actual spoon bowl itself. That's there, and as such it's a really useful device in that it not only removes material but it also smooths down the inside I know it's not easy to see, but it also takes out most of the major burrs. So that's what it's meant to do, and that's what it does. And there are different ways of using it, but always remember, if you can, 2 hands. Coming along quite nicely. But there will always be areas where we need to take quite a lot of material off. So this is coming along quite well in terms of it's giving me options that I can see as we get down here. I mean, listen to the wood. The wood will tell you which is the best sort of way to cut it for the shape you're looking for. You sort of tune into that a little bit. I'm not being all tree huggy, but there is no doubt about it that if you've got an idea in your mind about where you want to go with this or any carving, the spoon kind of takes you there, or the wood kind of takes you there. If you allow it to, don't force it, just go along with it. There's quite a lot of material to come off this one. Still, I would like quite a nice slim handle on it, like this. So it's going to take me a long time to do this. There may be a better way, and we'll go to that in a minute. As far as the bowl is concerned, another better way of doing the bowl is by using other tools like a gouge, for example. A number of gouges we could use. This sort of thing here, as you can see. This sort of thing here, if we're working on bigger spoons, pretty handy for taking material out. And this one here, which is one of my favourites, is an 8mm gouge. You can see the... again, it's very sharp, and it will take out a lot of material. You can see there. So digging us quite deeply into this, and we'd probably go back and use the hook knife to smooth that down a bit. So there are alternatives. If you can't get the hang of the hook knife, or you don't particularly like the action of it, or the way it works, then you can certainly succeed using other tools, like for example this. And as I say, there are various different gouges. What you can do is fix this in a vise, of course, and then use a normal chisel on it with a small mallet. Less control, but it will get you there as well. Now, we want to take this down, as we said earlier, make things a little bit slimmer. So let's stick it in this vise here and see what we can do with this device here. This is a Japanese a Japanese rasp, and certainly if you're getting into wood carving, I strongly suggest you look at getting one of these. 2 sides, one much heavier than the other. Really, really good for taking you down right into the wood, giving you an idea of where you're going, smoothly working your way down to the size you want to be. One thing I will say, occurs to me just now, is we're going to talk about sanding at some point. We're almost there when you think about it. And I certainly strongly suggest you wear a mask. Sanding is essential with all carving at some point, and to get the finish that you want. I'd say sandpaper is probably one of your most valuable tools. But you can't hear me, of course. But certainly when you're doing anything that causes sawdust, please wear a mask. There are better masks than this for that subject, but any kind of mask will do. Some woods are more toxic than others. Once that sawdust gets in the air, this is perfectly fine. Basswood, most domestic woods are okay, but we do work with some odd woods, Siberian larch, for example, that kind of thing. And there's plenty of information available on the internet as to, whether they're poisonous or not. But sawdust is not good for your lungs, full stop. So my recommendation would certainly be to wear a mask. So it's a very effective way. There are other rasps are available. But I do like this particular Japanese one. couple of minutes, we've taken that down, as you can see, considerably. And we're looking to get it down to something like this. So we're on the way. Similarly on the back of the spoon. Again, this is where I mentioned yesterday you have to be a bit careful because this is a weaker part than that. If we're taking a lot of material off this side of the spoon, then we need to be aware that we're putting a lot of pressure on the other side of the spoon. And too much enthusiasm, it's likely to crack, it's likely to split. So nicely rounded, but we want to take some more off. So for the purists among us, certainly we're using traditional tools here, chisels, gouges, knives, even a rasp. But we can move on to more modern things as well. We can start to make our spoon with a Dremel, or other makes are available. I've had this one for about 7 or 8 years from a local supermarket. So yeah, we can get stuck into it with a Dremel, that sort of thing, and that will help to take the thing down to the desired shape. So that's where we are at the moment. That's just a little interlude to talk a little bit about some of the techniques available. There's something incredibly satisfying about making something, whether it's a spoon or anything else. And when you make it with traditional type tools, it's extremely therapeutic. This is going to take a long time to get to where I want it to be, but the benefit for me is that I'm in a quiet space, I'm in my head, I'm in the moment, entirely in the moment, and it's incredibly therapeutic, very relaxing. And I think that's one reason why quite a few people in the shed have started to enjoy a little bit of this kind of work. I'm sure any type of woodwork is incredibly satisfying, but to actually produce something from a lump of wood, even if it takes hours and you're sitting watching Coronation Street in the background or something, very satisfying. For example, that is walnut, which is a very simple basic spoon, and it took a long time to get to that shape. This one again here is larch. As you can see, it's a love spoon, and the grain in the larch has stayed with us, and we've undercut at the back, so it's nicely finished. Quite like that one. Okay, well, I'll leave that one there just now, and we'll come back in a minute and see what we do once this is finished and in the shape we want, what we do about making it a bit more presentable and actually finishing it off. Thanks very much. Right, for those of you who are still with me, thank you for staying. We've reached the point now where we're going to talk about finishing the spoon off, either for use as a spoon or for display, this sort of thing here. As a gift, you could engrave it as well. You could use pyrography on it to make it as you wish. But the main decision I think you have to make is whether it's going to be used as a spoon or just for display, because that determines what kind of oil we're going to put on it. It has to be food safe if it's going to be used. The little ones like these can make really nice coffee spoons, but because of the colour, but again you have to be careful what you're putting on them. You'll want it to last as well. So this is a spoon that I carried on with after the last video. It's had a great deal of sandpaper, as you can see. Something I've quite enjoyed doing. I find it very restful, therapeutic. But I just wanted to show you that I do use several things to make life easier. I did use a Dremel sandpaper on a Dremel to take it down a fair bit, and then I got stuck into it with normal sandpaper. This is 180, which is certainly as far as I wanted to go with it. There are various grades of sandpaper. If you're not familiar with it, you can take it right up to this 1500 there. You get colour-coded sandpaper, which you tend to use on the lace for pens and things, going right up to 12,000. Not really necessary for a spoon unless you're after some sort of ultra smooth glossy effect. There's a lot of debate about that. A lot of carvers like to leave their carvings with knife marks in them. It gives them a certain credibility, provenance. It makes them fairly unique, and people like to buy things that are unique. There are actually spoon fests around the world where people display their spoons, and a large number of people collect spoons. So the question is, are we going to go for something that can be used or something for display? So I think we'll go for something that can be used, and that's certainly something that we did here. In this case, I used baby oil. Other makes are available. Surprisingly, it doesn't leave a smell, and it does leave quite a nice finish on the spoon. But my favourite oil of all is tung oil, which is taken from a tree, a Japanese tree, the tung tree. It's a nice oil to use. It dries in fairly quickly and well. Normally 2 or 3 coats is enough, depending on the wood, and I find it quite easy to apply. It's fairly straightforward. Just a brush or sometimes a cloth will do. Just straight onto the wood, and you'll see the colour start to change right away. This basswood gives a lovely kind of yellowy, creamy colour. I'll get some on the back here and let that dry in, and I'll talk a little bit more about sanding techniques and the way I've sanded some of these. I think everybody has their own idea about the best way to finish these things off. There are as many ideas as there are carvers, and there's plenty of them around. So a lot of people also are fairly mystified about how do you get a smooth surface on the inside of the spoon here. And again, there are ways of doing that. There's nothing quite beats the idea of actually just getting the sandpaper around your finger and getting in there. But one thing I will say is that before you get to the sanding, you might want to do a water test. A water test is simply that, where we immerse the spoon in water, get it wet, and you can see then what blemishes there are before you get to oil it. You can see where the cut marks are, you can see where blemishes in the wood are. They stand out when it's wet, and they even stand out when it's oiled. As you can see there are some blemishes in this. In fact, there's a nice big knife mark on the bottom of that bowl, which is a bit annoying, but I might take that out later on. So you can water test it to see what you're going to get when you oil it, which is a good idea. You can see the colour that's taking on is beginning to look a little bit like that one as well. So not much difference between the tung oil and the Johnson's baby oil. To answer the question about sanding inside there, I tend to use a tube, this kind of thing. That's a useful size, that one. And that's 180 sandpaper. If I wrap that round the end and just secure it with a rubber band at the bottom, like so, I can then use that as a fairly solid way of sanding down the spoon. But if I push it up a little bit and curl that in, just like that, then it becomes quite useful for doing inside the bowl of the spoon, like this one for example, which isn't finished. You're beginning to get at the inside of the bowl from many different angles. Sandpaper starts to fold and bend itself into the shape that you're actually sanding. So that's a pretty useful way of using something to make life a little bit easier. This is actually oak, and it's really, really solid. really difficult to sand down. So I think it's a candidate for the Dremel later on. Nice spoon though. You can see inside there it's fairly smooth, and that's just by using a technique like that. Let me reiterate what I said in the last video. Whenever you're using sandpaper or even a Dremel or any kind of abrasive material, please wear a mask. Sandpaper produces a lot of sawdust, and it's not good for your lungs, so please bear that in mind. Again, useful for something like this. Use your imagination. This is a piece of bark off a lime tree in the shed's garden, and I started to turn it into a love spoon on the other side, trying to keep the bark in place as much as possible. So although I've cut this down with a knife, a lot of what happens to it next will be by using sandpaper, both on the tube and by hand. And this one will probably, certainly be for display, so I will use the tung oil on that, and then possibly some sort of varnish. You can also use this not for something that's going to be used for food, but this is an artist's glazing medium, which gives the spoon or the item you're working on a nice subtle kind of glow, rather than a varnished finish, something quite subtle. So I like to use that, and that's basically all I use in terms of finishing. Tung oil or something similar, or even Johnson's baby oil, which is a nice cheaper alternative. Tung oil isn't cheap. And maybe something like a glazing medium. In the past I've used other stuff. I've used varnish, yacht varnish, that kind of thing, but you know, it's not really necessary on a spoon that's being used for display. It is of course necessary to tell the people that you're giving the spoon to that they've been oiled, and that they will probably need to be oiled again at fairly regular intervals, because the oil will dry in and the spoon will start to look dull and need a little bit of TLC. So that's simply a question of every now and again giving it a bit of oil. So that's coming up quite nicely, and you can see the effect that has there. So I hope that's been interesting and instructive. We've actually come quite a long way in a very short period of time as far as the videos are concerned. We started with a block of wood, basswood if you recall, also known as lime, lindenwood in Germany. And we cut that into some shapes that would give us some spoons, trying to be economical. And from there we cut the spoons down, we cut the shapes, the blanks down into smaller blanks, and started by using the hook knife, if you recall, which helps us to excavate the bowl and bring it down to the sort of level that we wanted for a spoon. And again, wear the glove when you're using the knives, wear the gloves. We went on from there to how we would finish the spoon, and we talked about various different techniques for sanding and cutting, and we've ended up basically with something rather nice that we can keep forever, or display, or give away as gifts. So that kind of concludes what I set out to achieve. I hope you found it interesting, and maybe inspire you to take up wood carving yourself. Always happy to see folk at the shed and get you started, so don't be afraid to contact us. You're more than welcome. Thanks for listening and spending the time with me. Bye bye.